and thank you for joining me on the show today. This is the Now Talks, a collection of inspiring personal stories and leadership lessons from some of the world's most iconic leaders. It is the weekly podcast for women in leadership, brought to you by Nations of Women. My name is Dr. Tina Allton, and I'm your host for today and the coming weeks. So here's a question for you. Is there an area in your life that like you feel like, oh my gosh, this is such a big stretch? Or perhaps it might be the complete opposite, where you actually have completely lost what it takes to stretch. By that I mean where you've just settled. Either because perhaps something was too overwhelming, something was not as you expected it to be, something that, knocked you before you could even, say jack, something that shook you, something that you did not expect, you didn't see coming, and it comes and it knocks you off your feet. And before you know it, you have settled. Have you ever experienced anything like that? Well, I am glad I'm not the only one who has experienced something like this before. The truth is, all of us at some point in our lives would have experienced a moment, perhaps, or a short season, perhaps, or a time where we actually came to that crossroad of, do I settle or do I actually stretch and move forward, take that next step forward? Well, if you are at that crossroad, then fear not, because you're not alone. So I want to talk to us this week, really from that place of crossroads. When it comes to that crossroad of either settling or pushing yourself one more time in order to cross over that threshold, what do you do? What does that look like? How do you actually navigate that terrain? Welcome again to the Now Woman Talks, the podcast for every woman in leadership. I am so excited to come to you this week because to say that we're excited is an understatement. In less than a week, we're all going to be moving down into Cairo. I don't mean moving countries or moving home, but Cairo is on its way to becoming an iconic global hub. This October, it's on its way to becoming a global hub for iconic leaders this October, because we have gathered 50 global leaders who'll be converging in Cairo for the Summit for the Bold. So I'm sure you would hear more about that. But anyway, for now, I'm so excited because in all the preparations leading up to this, we have found ourselves at crossroads where we have to push and push and push and push and really, really stretch ourselves. And what has really transpired is the fact that it's never comfortable when we have to stretch ourselves, right? When we have to stretch ourselves, it's never comfortable. But the thing is, if you have a goal, if you have something that you need to achieve, is something that you're called to, it's going to require you to actually constantly look at stretching. And sometimes you have to give up in order to, you have to give something. You have to give away something. You have to trade something off. You have to lay something down in order to be able to actually receive what is, coming for you next. Now, picture this. If I'm giving you a gift, would you have to, stretch your hand to receive the gift? Yeah. But what if you have bags and bags and bags in your hands and your hand is already full? There's no way you're going to be able to receive that gift. So guess what's going to happen? You're going to have to put those bags down in order to free your hands to then be able to receive the gift. It's the same thing when we have to trade. We have to trade off, right? We're constantly trading off, pieces of our lives or pieces of our goals, our vision, our aspirations, the pieces of the very who we are, the core of who we are, for something else. And so we want to explore that, whether it's always the worthwhile or actually, what is worthwhile, what isn't. So Here's a quote by Eric Hoffer. People will cling on to an unsatisfactory way of life rather than change in order to get something better for fear of getting something worse. So, again, to the subject of fear, when you're afraid of the unknown, the uncertainties, then ultimately you will be stuck in a place that is not meant to be where we are, right? So, it's always, always, always worthwhile to think about the fact that actually, I think we've talked about this in one of the previous podcasts about taking calculated risk. When you take a calculated risk, you will be oftentimes end up with something far more worthwhile. Now, trading off is constantly in every aspect of our lives, right? It's always in every aspect of our lives. We have to trade off certain things. It might be, for example, sleep. For me, let's say thinking back, to secondary school, it was trading off sleep to actually push myself to study that little bit more because I was so much younger when I was in school. So, in terms of like head maturity, I was way behind all of my peers because I was like, in secondary school 2 years before I actually finished primary school. So you have to push yourself. So even in something like that, you have to trade off. We're constantly trading off things in our life. And what I want us to think about is the fact that when you are at that crossroad of having to trade something, trade off, give something up in order to gain something far better, you have to see that as an opportunity. If you don't see that as an opportunity, it will come up and show up and make you feel or give you fear. It would fill you with fear because of the fear of the unknown. Remember the quotes that I shared at the beginning? People hang on to unsatisfactory lives because they don't want to give up because of the fear of that I might get something worse. But if you see the crossroad as your road for opportunities, as your opportunity for growing, as your opportunity for gaining something far better, far greater, then you are filled with courage, you're filled with boldness, you're filled with joy, you're filled with everything that you need, positivity, the right mindset. You're able to have clarity and you're able to move forward in a very bold step. So whenever you're at that crossroad and you have to let go of something in order to step forward or cross into the threshold, remember to look at it as an opportunity. And then the other thing is, when you go through this opportunity, when you cross over this threshold, two things can happen. Either it will change it for the better or it will change it for the worse. And what happens really determines on what you do at the crossroad. If you don't cross, then there's no room, there's no opportunity for you to actually gain, what was on the others. Again, to that quote of everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. So when you're filled with fear and you don't actually let go in order to cross over, there's no room, there's no opportunity for growth, there's no opportunity for change. But when you're filled with boldness and courage and joy and clarity, and you're able to step boldly across that threshold and you let go in order to gain that which is far better and greater, guess what? That is your opportunity for growth, right? And it's worthwhile also talking about this and mention that it's never easy to let go of the things that sometimes we've come to hold on to for so long. And it always, whenever you're at that crossroad, I think is very, very real. We always like to be real. It's very real that you literally find yourself in that place of having to make very difficult um decisions, very difficult changes, right? And the difference between where you are now and where you potentially can be, really, that difference is simply um comes down to what you're willing to do, what you're willing to change, what you're willing to trade off. And so when you're not in that space of strength, to actually recognize that I can take a calculated risk. I can cross over this threshold because this is an opportunity for me to grow. And that on the other side of all the things I am afraid of is really, truly all the things that I am desiring, dreaming, I've been called to be. Then you're able to, receive, and you're able to actually step into the fullness of what is on the other side. And the other thing as well is, yes, you would actually feel that loss because nobody likes to let go. Nobody likes to put things, to let go. But I've held on to this for so long. So once I was reading a story, and there was a picture of somebody who's been climbing a very huge wall, barbed wires, it's been cutting in his hands or her hands, whatever, and they've been climbing, and blood everywhere. um and they're almost at the top, and someone is like, you've got to let go, and it's like, no, I've climbed, so it's taken me so long to get to the top here, but as the person's climbing up, it's even more harder, more painful. So again, when you look at that picture, how often do we live our lives that way, where we're hanging on to things that are actually not serving us well? It's not serving us fully. It's no longer serving us in the season which we're in, or in the time in which we're in. But because of fear, we still hang on to that, even though it is no longer serving us. So yes, you will feel the pain of, oh, I've got to let this go. But I promise you, if you will push through your pain and the fear of what you're going to lose, you absolutely, without a doubt, will be able to gain everything else that is on the other side. And I just want to encourage as well, it's never too late. There's never time lost, because although you can't really go back in time and make a brand new start, but nations, that when we talk about everything is now, you can start from where you are now. You can start from your now. Your next best time is now. Your next best move is in the now. The next best, what do you call it, thing you can do is to start now. So don't think about how much time perhaps, I don't know, maybe people have told you, or you have even told yourself that it's too late, or I'm too old, or whatever it is. You need to let go of all of those and remember, yes, and you tell yourself, yes, I cannot go back to yesterday, but you know what? I can start from my now, and I can make a brand new start right now. Right. So remember to tell yourself that, because the truth is, you can let go and you can trade at any point in time. And to really go any higher, to go higher in life, to make any real impact, transform other people's lives, have any influence or anything, it always will require you to let go of something, because you constantly have to have that desire and the heart posture of wanting to grow, to become the fullness of all that you're meant to be, the fullness of all you are supposed to be, right? Because all of us are on that journey to becoming the fullness of who we're called to be. So again, remember, you can start now. It's never too late. You can't go back, but you can always, always move forward, right? So the other thing, I must really reiterate, because I think of a story that I think many of us will resonate with, that sometimes, depending on what you trade off, when you don't trade off the right things, it will never leave you. You're never left the same. And by that, I mean, the story that is in the Bible about Jacob and Esau. Esau did a trade-off that left him completely different for the rest of his life. And Jacob was also completely transformed for the rest of his life. So you have to be able to recognize that it's not everything that you have to trade off, because if you trade off the wrong thing, if you trade off who you truly are, let's say the core of who you are, the fullness of your identity, in order to fit in, let's say, if we bring it right now real into our everyday lives, how often have you tried to change who you are in order to fit in? How often have you tried to be quiet because people say that you're too much, you talk too much, so you become quiet so that you fit into somebody else's idea of who you're meant to be? How often have you stopped yourself from going, stepping out, getting to the table, taking a seat, pulling a chair and sitting down because you know that you carry value? How often have you stopped yourself because people have said this or that person has said this, and you shrink yourself in order to fit into somebody else's idea of who you're meant to be? So you do not ever trade off who you have been called to be. You do not ever trade off who you are meant to be. You do not ever trade off the fullness of who you're meant to be. You don't trade off who you are to shrink in order to fit into somebody's ideology. You have to know who you are. You have to remember who you've been called to be. You have to remember the one who created you. Were created for good works and for greater works. You have to remember, and you have to constantly tell yourself that you are, and you speak who you are to yourself, so that you never, ever, ever, under any circumstance, trade your identity, trade the essence of who you are, trade the core of who you are, trade your principles of who you are in order to gain, in order to fit in order to meet somebody else's ideology. So if that is you and you don't know who you are, you don't fully know your identity, it's never too late. You can always start now. So think about the story of Jacob and Esau, and how Esau traded off his birthright, and that changed him forever. And so you have to remember, to think through what it is that I am trading off. Is this worthwhile? Not all trade-offs are worthwhile, as we see in the story of Jacob and Esau. You do not trade off who you are, your identity, your essence, your core, the fullness of who you are. You don't trade that off. So not every trade-off is worth it. And are you willing to give up instant gratification in order to have a better future, right? Are you willing to give up the mask that perhaps you've been wearing in order to show up in the fullness of who you're meant to be, right? Here are some questions for you. What trade-offs have you made in the past that you know was a bad trade-off for you? And on the other side, what trade-offs have you made in the past that you know were good and great and has actually impacted you in your present, and you know that for your future, it has been a greatest investment for your future, right? And then you also want to take a moment and sit down. What are you not willing to trade up? What are you not willing to give up? Right? You don't give up your identity. You don't give up your essence. You don't give up who you've been called to. You don't give up where you have been placed. So make a list of what are your non-negotiables, because then it doesn't matter if an opportunity comes, something comes disguised as an opportunity, you are able to, with clarity and clarity of mind, be able to recognize, determine this is not a trade-off worth making, right? And what else do you need to make right now? What do you need to correct? What have you procrastinated in not letting go, and that has not been serving you well, and is actually keeping you marking time, keeping you where you know you're not meant to be, because you know that you are made for so much more, right? I always say that we're enough, but then there's always more in us. So again, I want you to take some time and write that down. What trade-offs have you not made and has consequently kept you in that average, mediocre, that little place What is it that you have held on to that has made you so small when you know that you are made for so much more? So I don't know. I know this week is been quite, tough and hard and harsh, but it is true. We always want to be having conversations that are real, that are genuine, that is really very much at the forefront of our everyday lives. If this has impacted you in any way, or perhaps you have something else you want to add, I would love to hear from you. So reach out to us and let's know. What trade-off did you make that was the greatest investment to your future? And what trade-off did you make that really truly impacted you for the worse? And what are you holding on to now that you know you need to let go in order to be able to reach the future, the fullness of your potential? I look forward to hearing from you. Until next week, take care and God bless you. And that's all for this week. You've been listening to Dr. Tina Allton with the Now Talks, the weekly podcast for women in leadership, brought to you by Nations of Women. All that remains is for me to say have a fantastic week, stay safe, and reach out if you need any help now at nationsofwomen.com. Until next time, enjoy the pursuit of your potential and remember, now is your time.